The Monday morning sun streamed through the tall windows of courtroom 3B, casting long shadows across the wooden benches. Judge Margaret Henderson adjusted her reading glasses and glanced at the clock on the wall. 9:30 sharp. Time to begin another week of cases. She'd been a judge for nearly 15 years now, and Mondays always brought a mixed bag of disputes. Neighbors arguing over fence lines, small business conflicts, unpaid debts. Nothing too dramatic usually. Just regular people trying to sort out their problems through the legal system. David Morrison stood at the defendant's table, his calloused hands gripping a battered manila folder. His work boots were clean but worn, and his button-up shirt looked freshly pressed, though it had seen better days. He was the kind of man who worked with his hands for a living. You could tell by the way he stood, slightly uncomfortable in the formal setting of a courtroom. He kept glancing back at the gallery, where a small figure sat on the edge of a bench, legs dangling high above the floor. His daughter. She was supposed to stay there, quiet and still, while he handled this mess on his own. The bailiff, a heavy-set man named Raymond who'd worked in this courthouse for 20 years, stood up and called out in his booming voice. Case number 2847, Peterson Construction versus David Morrison. Damages claim in the amount of $8,400. David's throat felt dry. $8,000. He might as well have been asked to fly to the moon. He was barely keeping up with rent and groceries as it was. Judge Henderson looked up from her papers. Mr. Morrison, I see you're representing yourself today. Is that correct? Before David could open his mouth to respond, a small, clear voice rang out from behind him. No, Your Honor, he has representation. I'm his lawyer. The courtroom went still for just a moment. Then heads turned. Even the court reporter looked up from her machine. An 8-year-old girl stepped forward from the gallery. She wore an oversized navy blue blazer that hung past her hands. The sleeves rolled up several times. Around her neck was a man's tie, the kind you'd wear to a job interview, draped down to her knees like some kind of formal scarf. In her small hands, she clutched a spiral notebook covered in colorful stickers. Her name was Lily Morrison, and she walked with the kind of determination that only a child on a mission could have. Her sneakers squeaked slightly on the polished floor as she made her way to stand beside her father. Judge Henderson blinked. Then a smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. Around the courtroom there were a few chuckles. Even the plaintiff's attorney, a man in an expensive suit named Mr. Richards, couldn't help but grin. Sweetheart, Judge Henderson said, her voice gentle and warm. This is very sweet of you, but you need to go sit back down. This is a courtroom and only real lawyers can represent people here. But Lily didn't move. She planted her feet firmly and looked up at the judge. Her hands were shaking slightly, but her voice stayed steady. I know I can't really be his lawyer, Your Honor, she said. I'm only 8. But my dad doesn't have money for a real lawyer, and he needs help. The chuckling died down. Judge Henderson's smile faded into something more serious. She leaned forward slightly in her chair. What do you mean he needs help, honey? David put his hand on his daughter's shoulder. Lily, please, just go sit down. I can handle this, but Lily shook her head. She looked up at her father with eyes that were far too worried for a child her age. Then she turned back to the judge. My dad can't read very well, Your Honor, she said quietly. He's been trying to get ready for today for weeks, but all the papers are really hard. He doesn't understand them. I've been helping him at night after my little brother goes to bed. The courtroom fell completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. David's face went red. His jaw clenched tight. This was his worst nightmare. His deepest shame spoken out loud in front of strangers, in front of a judge, in front of the man who was trying to take $8,000 from him. Judge Henderson's expression changed entirely. The amusement was gone. Now she looked at the father and daughter standing before her with something different in her eyes. Understanding, maybe. Or concern. Mr. Richards cleared his throat. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. If the defendant cannot properly represent himself, then perhaps we should proceed with a default judgment. But the judge held up one hand, silencing him. She was still looking at Lily and David. Mr. Morrison, she said carefully, is what your daughter is saying true? Do you have difficulty reading? David wanted to disappear. He wanted the floor to open up and swallow him whole, but he couldn't lie, not here, not under oath. Yes, ma'am, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I dropped out of school when I was young. 8th grade. Had to help my family. Never really learned to read proper. I can read some things, but legal papers, he shook his head. They might as well be in another language. Lily squeezed her father's hand. Then she held up her notebook. I organized everything for him, Your Honor, she said. I made a list of what happened. I got pictures and papers that show my dad didn't do what they say he did. I wrote it all down so he could understand it. Judge Henderson sat back in her chair. She removed her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. In 15 years on the bench, she'd seen a lot of things. But this was a first. Around the courtroom, people were watching in silence. The handful of folks waiting for their own cases. The court staff. Even Mr. Richards had lost his smug expression. This wasn't funny anymore. This was a man who'd been trying his best to prepare for court, despite a challenge he'd hidden his whole adult life. And this was a child who loved her father enough to try to help him in the only way she knew how. Mr. Morrison, the judge said finally, I'm going to call a short recess. I need to figure out how to handle this situation properly. Bailiff, please escort Mr. Morrison and his daughter to the conference room. Mr. Richards, you come too. Raymond, the bailiff, stood up. All rise, he called out, though his usual booming voice was softer now. As everyone stood, Judge Henderson stepped down from the bench. She looked at Lily one more time. The little girl in the oversized blazer, holding her notebook like it contained the secrets of the universe. Come with me, honey, the judge said. Let's see what you've got in that notebook of yours. And with that, the courtroom emptied, leaving only whispers and wondering faces behind. The conference room was smaller than the courtroom, with a long wooden table and chairs that were too big for Lily. Her feet didn't touch the ground when she sat down. Judge Henderson took a seat across from David and his daughter, while Mr. Richards sat at the far end, his leather briefcase resting beside him. The judge folded her hands on the table and looked at them both. Her expression was serious now, but not unkind. All right, she said. Let's talk about what's really going on here. David shifted in his seat. He felt like he was back in school, about to get scolded for something. That old familiar feeling of not being good enough, of being stupid. He'd felt it his whole life. I'm sorry, Your Honor, he started. I didn't mean for my daughter to get involved. She should have stayed in her seat. I told her to stay quiet. I'm not here to scold anyone, Mr. Morrison, Judge Henderson said. I just need to understand the situation. You're being sued for $8,000. That's a lot of money. And you're saying you've had trouble preparing because of reading difficulties. David nodded. His jaw was still tight with embarrassment. I can read some, he explained. Like signs and simple stuff. Instructions on a box. But when I got all those papers in the mail about this court case, He paused, struggling to find the words. I didn't know where to start. There were so many pages. Big words. Legal talk. I tried to figure it out, but I kept getting lost. Lily spoke up. He stayed up really late lots of nights trying to understand. I heard him in the kitchen. He was really stressed out. Judge Henderson looked at the little girl. And that's when you decided to help? Yes, ma'am, Lily said. She opened her notebook and pushed it across the table toward the judge. I'm pretty good at reading. My teacher says I read at a 6th grade level, even though I'm only in 3rd grade, so I told Dad I could help him understand the papers. The judge picked up the notebook and began flipping through it. Her eyebrows rose slightly as she scanned the pages. Inside were neat, careful notes written in a child's handwriting, dates and times, names of people, descriptions of what happened. There were even little drawings in the margins, like a child's version of a legal diagram. Arrows pointing to different parts of events, stars next to important facts. This is quite thorough, Judge Henderson said, sounding genuinely impressed. Did you write all this yourself, Lily? Yes, ma'am. My dad told me everything that happened and I wrote it down. Then I helped him practice what to say. We practiced for hours. Mr. Richards cleared his throat. Your Honor, while this is touching, it doesn't change the facts of the case. My client, Peterson Construction, has documented evidence that Mr. Morrison damaged expensive equipment on their job site. Whether he can read or not doesn't change what happened. Judge Henderson held up a hand. I understand that, Counselor. But I'm trying to make sure we have a fair proceeding here. Mr. Morrison, have you tried to get legal help? There are legal aid services available. David nodded miserably. I called 3 places. They all said they were full up. Had waiting lists months long. And I couldn't afford to pay a regular lawyer. I barely make enough to keep food on the table and pay rent. This was the reality that Judge Henderson saw too often in her courtroom. People who needed legal help but couldn't afford it. People who tried to navigate a complex system on their own and got lost in the process. Tell me about your work situation, the judge said. What do you do for a living? I'm a construction worker, David answered. General labor mostly. I work for different contractors. Whoever's hiring. I did a job for Peterson Construction about 4 months ago. Demolition work on an old warehouse. It was supposed to be a 3-week job. And what are they claiming you damaged? Excavator. One of those big digging machines. They say I left it running overnight and it overheated. Burned out the engine. But I didn't do that. I know I didn't. Lily jumped in again. He has proof, Your Honor. That's what's in my notebook. He has his time card that shows what time he left that day. And he has other things too. Judge Henderson looked at the little girl with growing respect. This child had been working harder than some paralegals she'd seen. Lily, can I ask you something? How did you know what kind of information to collect? Lily's face brightened a bit. I went to the library. Miss Katie, she's the librarian at school, she helped me find books about court. And I watched videos online about how trials work. I wanted to make sure I got everything right for my dad. An 8-year-old had gone to the library and researched legal procedures. Had taken notes and organized evidence. Had done all of this because she saw her father struggling and wanted to help. Judge Henderson felt something tighten in her chest. She'd been a judge long enough that she thought she'd seen everything, but this got to her in a way she hadn't expected. Mr. Morrison, she said, turning back to David, you should be very proud of your daughter. She's worked very hard to help you. David's eyes were shiny. He put his arm around Lily and pulled her close. I'm proud of her every day, he said quietly. She's the best thing in my life. Her and her little brother. Mr. Richards shifted in his seat. Even he seemed less sure of himself now. This wasn't going the way he'd expected when he walked into court this morning. Judge Henderson closed the notebook and slid it back across the table to Lily. Here's what I'm going to do, she said. This is an unusual situation, but I believe everyone deserves a fair chance to present their side. Mr. Morrison, I cannot allow your daughter to officially represent you. She's a child and the law is very clear about that. However, I can allow you to represent yourself with assistance. David looked confused. What does that mean? It means you will speak for yourself in court. But Lily can sit next to you and help you organize your documents. She can hand you papers when you need them. She can quietly remind you of points you wanted to make. Think of her as your assistant, not your lawyer. Do you understand? David nodded slowly. I think so. Good, now I'm also going to do something else. I'm going to give you both 2 hours. I want you to go to the courthouse law library down the hall. There's a volunteer there today, a retired attorney who helps people with self-representation. Her name is Mrs. Chen. I'm going to call her and explain your situation. She can't be your lawyer, but she can give you some guidance on how to present your case properly. Really? David looked almost stunned. You'd do that? Mr. Morrison, the point of court isn't to trick people or trap them. The point is to find the truth and deliver justice. If you truly didn't damage that equipment, then you deserve a chance to prove it. But you need to know how to present your evidence properly. She stood up and everyone else stood too. We'll reconvene at noon, Judge Henderson said. Use this time wisely. The courthouse law library smelled like old books and floor polish. Rows of legal volumes lined the walls, thick books with gold lettering on their spines. David had never been in a place like this. It felt like a different world. Mrs. Chen was waiting for them at a table near the back. She was a small woman with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, wearing a cardigan despite the warm weather. Her eyes were sharp and kind behind her glasses. You must be Mr. Morrison, she said, standing to shake his hand. And this must be the young lady Judge Henderson told me about. Lily nodded shyly. In this room full of law books and serious atmosphere, she suddenly felt very small. Sit, Mrs. Chen said, gesturing to the chairs. We don't have much time, so let's get right to work. But first, I want to understand your story. Not just the case. I want to know about you. David wasn't sure why that mattered, but he sat down anyway. Lily climbed into the chair next to him, placing her notebook carefully on the table. What do you want to know? David asked. Mrs. Chen leaned forward. Judge Henderson mentioned you have 2 children. Tell me about your family. David glanced at Lily, then back at Mrs. Chen. Well, there's Lily here. She's 8. And my son Tommy, he's 5. Just started kindergarten this year. And their mother? The question hung in the air for a moment. David's face changed. The stress and embarrassment from before were replaced by something deeper. sadness that had settled into his bones. My wife passed away 2 years ago, he said quietly. Cancer, it was fast. 6 months from diagnosis to the end. Mrs. Chen's expression softened. I'm so sorry. Lily reached over and took her father's hand. She'd heard him tell this story before, but it never got easier. She remembered her mom. The way she smelled like vanilla. The songs she used to sing. How safe everything felt when she was around. After Rachel died, David continued. It's been just the 3 of us. I'm doing my best, but it's hard. Really hard. Working enough to pay the bills, taking care of 2 kids alone, trying to keep everything together. Do you have family who helps? Mrs. Chen asked. David shook his head. My parents passed when I was younger. Rachel's mom lives in another state, and she's not doing too good health-wise. We're pretty much on our own. Mrs. Chen nodded slowly, taking this all in. And your reading difficulties. Can you tell me about that? This was the part David hated talking about. But Lily had already told everyone in court, so there was no point hiding it now. I grew up poor, he said. Real poor. My dad worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table. When I was in 8th grade, he got hurt at work. Couldn't work anymore. My mom was working at a grocery store, but it wasn't enough, so I dropped out to help. Started working construction with my uncle. Been doing it ever since. You never went back to school? No, ma'am. I meant to. Always told myself I'd get my diploma someday. But then I was working full-time, and then I met Rachel, and we got married young, and then the kids came. He paused. I can get by, you know. I learned to hide it pretty well. But reading official stuff, legal papers, anything complicated, I just can't do it. Lily squeezed his hand. But you're really smart, Dad. You can build anything. You know how to fix stuff. You're good at math in your head. David smiled at his daughter. Thanks, kiddo. Mrs. Chen was writing notes on a legal pad. Does your employer know about your reading difficulties? Some do, some don't. The good contractors, they don't care as long as I do the work right. But some places, if they knew, they wouldn't hire me. So I keep it quiet mostly. What about Peterson Construction? Did they know? I don't think so. I never told them. They just hired me for demolition work. It was supposed to be simple. Tear down walls, haul debris, that kind of thing. Mrs. Chen put down her pen and looked at David seriously. Mr. Morrison, what I'm about to tell you is important. You didn't do anything wrong by not finishing school. Life happens. Circumstances happen. But you're in a situation now where your reading difficulties have made it very hard for you to defend yourself. That's not fair and that's not right. David felt his throat tighten. It was the first time anyone in this whole legal process had said it wasn't his fault. The law is complicated on purpose, Mrs. Chen continued. It's written in language that even educated people struggle with. The fact that you've made it this far, that you've tried so hard to prepare, says a lot about your character. Lily spoke up. He tried really hard, ma'am. Every night after work, he'd spread out all the papers on the kitchen table. He'd try to read them, but I could see him getting frustrated. Sometimes he'd just put his head in his hands. That's when you decided to help, Mrs. Chen said. Yeah. One night I couldn't sleep. I came downstairs to get water and I saw him crying. My dad never cries. I knew something was really wrong. David wiped at his eyes quickly. I didn't want her to see that. Dad was so worried about the money, Lily continued. $8,000. He kept saying he didn't have that kind of money. He said if they made him pay it, we might lose our apartment. Tommy might not have enough food. Mrs. Chen looked at this little girl who'd taken on the weight of adult worries, who'd seen her father's pain and decided to do something about it. So you went to the library, Mrs. Chen said. Yes, ma'am. The next day at school, I asked Miss Katie, the librarian, if she had any books about lawyers and court. She asked me why, and I told her my dad needed help. She was really nice about it. She found me some books, and she helped me understand them. And you read all those books? Well, parts of them. Some of it was too hard even for me. But I found the parts about evidence and witnesses and how to organize information. Then I watched videos on the computer about court procedures. There's a lot of stuff online. Mrs. Chen smiled. You're quite resourceful, young lady. I just wanted to help my dad. He's been so sad since Mom died. He works so hard for us. He never complains. He makes us breakfast every morning and helps us with homework even when he's tired. When Tommy had nightmares last month, Dad slept on his floor for a week so he wouldn't be scared. David put his arm around his daughter. You didn't have to tell her all that. But it's true, Lily insisted. You're a really good dad. And you didn't break that machine. I know you didn't. You would never do something like that. Mrs. Chen watched this exchange with something like wonder in her eyes. She'd been volunteering at the courthouse for 5 years now, helping people navigate the legal system. But she'd never seen anything quite like this. All right, she said finally. Let's look at what evidence you have. Lily, may I see your notebook? Lily pushed it across the table. Mrs. Chen opened it and began reading carefully, her experienced eyes scanning the childish handwriting and simple drawings. As she read, her expression changed from curious to impressed to something close to astonishment. This is remarkable, she said. Mrs. Chen kept turning pages in Lily's notebook, shaking her head in disbelief. The little girl had created something that looked like a case file. Not perfect, not professional, but organized in a way that showed real thought and effort. Tell me how you did this. Mrs. Chen said. Walk me through your process. Lily sat up straighter, proud that someone was taking her work seriously. Well, first I asked Dad to tell me everything that happened. Like, everything. From the very beginning. And when was the beginning? Mrs. Chen asked. David spoke up. 4 months ago, middle of June, I got a call from a guy named Rick Peterson. He runs Peterson Construction. Said he had a demolition job and needed laborers. I'd worked for him once before, about a year ago. That job went fine, so I said yes. Lily flipped to a page in her notebook. See, I wrote down the date Dad started, June 18th. He worked there for 2.5 weeks. Mrs. Chen looked at the page. There was a timeline drawn in colored pencils, dates marked with different colored stars. Very good. What kind of work was he doing? It was an old warehouse, David explained. They were tearing it down to build something new. My job was interior demolition, ripping out old fixtures, breaking down walls, hauling debris to the dumpster. Hard work, but honest work. And there were other workers there too? Yeah, about 6 or 7 of us on different days. Some guys were there the whole time. Some came and went depending on what needed doing. Lily pointed to another page. I made a list of all the workers Dad remembered. He told me their names and what they did. Mrs. Chen scanned the list. There were names, job descriptions, and even little notes like, nice guy, has 3 dogs, or always showed up late. The details a child would remember. This is helpful, Mrs. Chen said. These people could be witnesses. Did you talk to any of them? David shook his head. Most of them I only knew first names. We just worked together, you know? Didn't really socialize after hours. But I found one of them, Lily said excitedly. There was this man, Carlos. Dad said he worked on the excavator sometimes. I asked Dad where Carlos might be, and he said maybe working on other construction sites. So I looked up construction companies in our area online. Mrs. Chen's eyebrows went up. You called construction companies? Well, not exactly. I'm not allowed to use the phone without permission. But I found their websites, and I found Carlos on one of them. His full name is Carlos Mendoza, and he works for a company called Martinez Brothers Construction now. David looked at his daughter with surprise. You found Carlos? You didn't tell me that. I wanted it to be a surprise for court, Lily said. I wrote him a letter. Miss Katie helped me. We mailed it to his company. He wrote back 2 weeks ago. She pulled out a folded piece of paper from the back of her notebook. It was a handwritten note on lined paper. Mrs. Chen read it aloud. Dear Lily, I remember your dad. Good worker. I was surprised to hear about the trouble with the excavator. I remember that machine having problems before your dad even got there. The hydraulics were leaking. Rick knew about it but kept using it anyway. Hope this helps. Carlos Mendoza. The room went quiet. You did this on your own? Mrs. Chen asked. Lily nodded. Is it okay? Is that allowed in court? It's more than okay. This is witness testimony. Did you bring the envelope it came in? Yes, ma'am. Lily pulled that out too. It had a postmark and a return address. Mrs. Chen looked at David. Your daughter may have just won your case. David felt like he couldn't breathe. Really? This testimony suggests the excavator had pre-existing problems. That's huge. What else do you have in here, Lily? The little girl flipped through more pages. Okay, so Dad said the day the machine broke was July 3rd, but he wasn't even working that day, so I asked him to show me his time card. She pulled out a photocopy from a plastic sleeve she'd taped into the notebook. It was a timesheet with David's name, showing his hours for the first week of July. See, on July 2nd, Dad worked from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. Then he clocked out. July 3rd, there's nothing. He didn't work that day. Why not? Mrs. Chen asked David. Tommy had a doctor's appointment, David said. Routine checkup. I'd asked for the day off a week before. Rick said okay. Lily was already pulling out another paper. And here's the appointment card from the doctor's office. It says July 3rd at 10 a.m. And this is a receipt from the pharmacy. We got Tommy's medicine that same day, time stamped at 11:15 a.m. Mrs. Chen was staring at all these documents spread across the table. Lily, where did you learn to collect evidence like this? From the library books. They said you need proof of where you were and what you were doing. They called it an alibi. Dad was with me and Tommy on July 3rd. We went to the doctor, then to the pharmacy, then we got lunch at McDonald's because Tommy was good at the doctor. Do you have the McDonald's receipt too? Lily made a face. No, we threw that away. But I remember what time we were there, around noon. Mrs. Chen turned to David. When did you find out about the excavator breaking down? The next day I came back to work. July 5th, because the 4th was Independence Day, we had off. Rick called me into his office trailer. He was really mad, said the excavator engine was fried. Said someone had left it running overnight on July 3rd and it overheated. He asked if it was me. What did you say? I told him I wasn't even there on the 3rd. I had the day off. He said he'd check the time cards and let me know. Then a week later I got fired. He said it had to be me because I was the last one who used the machine on July 2nd. But that doesn't make sense, Mrs. Chen said. If you clocked out on July 2nd and weren't there on July 3rd, how could you have left the machine running overnight? That's what I tried to tell him, but he wouldn't listen. Then a month after that, I got papers in the mail. He was suing me for the cost of the repairs, $8,000. Lily had been listening to all of this, and now she spoke up. Dad said Rick was mean about it. He said Dad was lying about not being there, but Dad wasn't lying. I know he wasn't. Mrs. Chen tapped her pen on the table, thinking. Did the worksite have security cameras? David shrugged. I don't know. Maybe. It was a big property. I asked about that, Lily said. When I wrote to Carlos, I asked if there were cameras. He said there was a security guard who worked nights, but he didn't remember the guard's name. But you didn't stop there, did you? Mrs. Chen asked, seeing another paper clipped in the notebook. Lily grinned a little. No, ma'am. I called the property management company. I told them I was calling about the warehouse on Jefferson Street. I asked if they had security records from July 3rd. And what did they say? The lady said she'd have to check with her supervisor. So I gave her Dad's name and number, and guess what? A man called Dad last week. David took over the story. Yeah, this guy named Frank Torres called me. Said he was the night security guard at the warehouse. Said my daughter had contacted the property management company asking about July 3rd. And what did he tell you? Mrs. Chen asked, leaning forward with interest. He said he remembered that night because there was an incident. He found the excavator running around midnight. Engine was smoking. He shut it down and called Rick Peterson right away. Rick came out around 1 a.m. Mrs. Chen's eyes widened. Did he write this down? Did he give you a statement? Lily pulled out yet another paper. Mr. Torres was really nice. I asked Dad to call him back and ask if he would write down what he remembered. He said yes. He even signed it and put the date on it. The paper was simple, written in neat handwriting on plain notebook paper, but it was detailed. Frank Torres had written out everything he remembered from that night. The time he found the excavator running, the condition of the machine, the call to Rick Peterson, even the fact that he'd logged it in his security report. This is incredible, Mrs. Chen said. This proves you weren't even on site when the machine was left running. This proves someone else did it. But who? David asked. I don't want to get anyone else in trouble. Mrs. Chen looked at him seriously. Mr. Morrison, someone left that machine running. Whether it was an accident or on purpose, I don't know. But you're being blamed for something you didn't do. You have a right to defend yourself. She gathered all the documents together and looked at them as a whole. The timeline, the time card, the doctor's appointment, the letter from Carlos about the machine having problems, the statement from the security guard. All of it collected by an 8-year-old girl who just wanted to help her dad. Lily, Mrs. Chen said, you've done something remarkable here. You've built a case, a real case with evidence and witnesses. Some lawyers with fancy degrees couldn't do this as well as you have. Lily blushed. I just did what the book said to do. No, you did more than that. You didn't give up. You made phone calls and wrote letters. You tracked down witnesses. You organized everything so it makes sense. You should be very proud of yourself. Will it be enough? Lily asked quietly. Will Dad be okay? Mrs. Chen looked at David, then back at Lily. I think you have a strong case. Very strong. But we need to present it correctly in court. The judge needs to hear this in the right order, and she needs to see all this evidence properly. She spent the next hour coaching David on how to present his case, how to speak clearly, how to answer questions, how to present each piece of evidence and explain what it meant. Lily sat next to her father, taking notes on what Mrs. Chen was saying, creating a kind of script they could follow. By the time they walked back to the courtroom, David felt different. He still felt nervous, but now he also felt something else. Hope. Real hope that maybe, just maybe, this would turn out okay. Judge Henderson was already on the bench when they entered. The courtroom had filled up a bit more. Word had spread during the recess about the little girl trying to help her father, and a few more people had wandered in to watch. Mr. Morrison, the judge said. I trust Mrs. Chen was helpful? Yes, Your Honor, David said. Very helpful. Thank you for arranging that. Good. Now, before we proceed, Mr. Richards has something he'd like to say. The plaintiff's attorney stood up. He looked less confident than he had before. During the recess, he'd had time to think about what was happening, about what it would look like if he aggressively pursued a case against a widowed father who was just trying to defend himself with his 8-year-old daughter's help. Your Honor, he said, I've spoken with my client during the break. We'd like to propose a settlement. If Mr. Morrison agrees to pay $2,000, we'll drop the case. David felt his stomach drop. $2,000 was a lot less than $8,000, but it might as well have been $1 million. He didn't have it. Judge Henderson looked at David. Mr. Morrison, do you wish to accept this settlement offer? David glanced down at Lily. She was shaking her head firmly. No, Your Honor, David said, his voice stronger than he expected. I didn't do what they're saying I did. I have proof. I'd like to present my case. Mr. Richards sighed and sat back down. Judge Henderson nodded. Very well, Mr. Morrison, you may begin. Remember what Mrs. Chen taught you. Present your evidence clearly and stay focused on the facts. David stood up. His hands were shaking, but Lily was right there beside him, handing him the first document they'd prepared. Your Honor, he started, his voice rough but steady. I want to show you that I wasn't at the work site on July 3rd, which is when they say the excavator was damaged. He held up his time card. This is my time card. It shows I worked on July 2nd from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. Then I clocked out. On July 3rd, there's no entry because I had the day off. I'd requested it in advance for my son's doctor appointment. Lily handed him the appointment card. This is from my son's doctor. The appointment was at 10 a.m. on July 3rd. Here's the pharmacy receipt from that same day at 11:15 a.m. Judge Henderson examined each document as the bailiff brought them to her. She made notes on her legal pad. So you're establishing you weren't at work that day, she said. Go on. David felt himself getting into a rhythm. It was like Mrs. Chen had said. Just tell the story step by step. Your Honor, I also have a letter from a former coworker named Carlos Mendoza. He worked with me at that site. He says the excavator had problems before I even started working there. The hydraulics were leaking. He handed over Carlos's letter. Judge Henderson read it carefully. And I have something else, David continued. A statement from the security guard who was working that night. His name is Frank Torres. He found the excavator running at midnight on July 3rd. I wasn't there. He called Rick Peterson, who came to the site around 1 in the morning. Judge Henderson's expression changed as she read Frank Torres's statement. She looked up at Mr. Richards. Counselor, were you aware of this security guard's statement? Mr. Richards shifted uncomfortably. No, Your Honor. This is the first I'm hearing of it. Your client never mentioned that he was called to the site in the middle of the night? No, Your Honor. Judge Henderson set the papers down and removed her glasses. She was quiet for a moment, thinking. Mr. Morrison, who helped you collect all this evidence? David put his hand on Lily's shoulder. My daughter did, Your Honor, most of it anyway. She tracked down Carlos. She called the property management company. She organized everything. I couldn't have done this without her. The judge looked at Lily. Young lady, you did excellent work. Very thorough. Lily smiled, but she looked nervous too. Judge Henderson turned to Mr. Richards. Counselor, I'm going to give you an opportunity to call your client and discuss this new information. Based on what I'm seeing here, your case has significant problems. Mr. Morrison has established he wasn't at the worksite when the damage occurred, and he has witness testimony suggesting the equipment had pre-existing issues. Your Honor, may I request a recess to consult with my client? You may. We'll break for lunch. Everyone back here at 2 o'clock. David and Lily ate lunch in a small park across from the courthouse. They'd brought sandwiches from home because David couldn't afford to buy food out. Lily sat on the bench next to her father, swinging her legs and taking small bites of her peanut butter and jelly. Do you think we're winning, Dad? She asked. David wasn't sure how to answer that. I think the judge is listening to us. That's all we can ask for. Mr. Richards looked worried. Yeah, he did, but we can't count on anything yet. We just have to tell the truth and hope it's enough. Lily leaned against her father's arm. I was so scared when I stood up in court this morning. My legs were shaking. You were braver than I've ever been, kiddo. I'm so proud of you. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching pigeons peck at crumbs on the sidewalk. David thought about everything that had led to this moment. The phone call offering him a job that seemed like a blessing. The confusion when he got fired. The panic when the lawsuit papers arrived in the mail. All those nights trying to make sense of legal language that might as well have been written in code. And then his little girl stepping up to help him. Not because anyone asked her to, but because she saw him struggling and decided to do something about it. Whatever happens today, David said, I want you to know something. You didn't just help me with this case. You reminded me that it's okay to ask for help, that there's no shame in not being able to do something alone. Lily looked up at him. You're not stupid, Dad, you just can't read good. That's different, I know that now. Thanks to you. When they got back to the courtroom at 2 o'clock, things felt different. Mr. Richards was already there, and he looked like he'd had a difficult lunch. Rick Peterson, the owner of Peterson Construction, was sitting in the gallery. He was a heavy-set man with a red face and thinning hair, wearing a polo shirt with his company logo on it. Judge Henderson entered, and everyone stood. All right, she said, settling into her chair. Mr. Richards, have you had a chance to consult with your client? Yes, Your Honor. My client maintains that Mr. Morrison was responsible for the damage to the excavator. Even in light of the evidence presented this morning? Your Honor, we believe there are explanations for that evidence. Judge Henderson looked skeptical, but she nodded. Very well. You may call your first witness. Rick Peterson took the stand. He was sworn in and sat down heavily in the witness chair. Mr. Richards walked him through his version of events. How David had been one of several workers on the demolition project. How the excavator was in good working condition. How on the morning of July 4th, when Rick came to the site, he found the excavator with a burned-out engine. And why did you determine that Mr. Morrison was responsible? Mr. Richards asked. Because he was the last one to use that machine on July 2nd. I checked the logs. He was running it that afternoon, moving debris around. When I asked him about it, he got defensive. Judge Henderson interrupted. Mr. Peterson, you were called to the site in the middle of the night on July 3rd by your security guard. Is that correct? Rick hesitated. Yes, Your Honor. And what did you find when you arrived? The excavator was running. Engine was overheating. Frank, the security guard, had just shut it down, so the machine was left running for some time? Yes, ma'am. But Mr. Morrison has presented evidence that he wasn't at the site that day. He had the day off. Rick's face got redder. Well, maybe he came back. Maybe he forgot something. Did any of your security cameras capture him returning to the site? We didn't have cameras inside the work area, just at the main entrance. Did the entrance camera show Mr. Morrison entering the property on July 3rd? Rick shifted in his seat. I didn't check the entrance footage. Judge Henderson made a note. You didn't think to check your security footage before filing a lawsuit for $8,000. I trusted my judgment. Morrison was the last one on that machine. It had to be him. David felt Lily squeeze his hand under the table. Things were going better than he'd dared to hope. Judge Henderson turned to David. Mr. Morrison, would you like to ask Mr. Peterson any questions? This was the part David had been dreading. Mrs. Chen had coached him on it, but the idea of questioning someone still terrified him. He stood up, his mouth dry. Mr. Peterson, he started, his voice shaky. Did Carlos Mendoza ever tell you the excavator had problems? That the hydraulics were leaking? Rick crossed his arms. That machine was fine. But did he tell you about problems? Maybe he mentioned something. Equipment always has little issues. Doesn't mean anything. David glanced at his notes, the ones Lily had written out for him in big, clear letters. You said I got defensive when you asked me about the excavator. But didn't I tell you I had the day off on July 3rd? You might have said something like that. And did you check my time card to verify it? Rick paused. Eventually, yeah. And what did the time card show? That you weren't scheduled to work that day. So I was telling the truth. Rick didn't answer. Judge Henderson leaned forward. Mr. Peterson, answer the question. Yes, his time card showed he wasn't scheduled for July 3rd. David felt a surge of confidence. He looked at his next note card. Who else had access to the excavator? Any of the workers could use it if they needed to. So someone else could have used it on July 3rd? But you weren't supposed to be there. The site was closed. Then how did the excavator get turned on? Rick's face was very red now. I don't know. Maybe someone broke in. Did you report a break-in to the police? No. Why not? Because I didn't think of it at the time. Judge Henderson cut in again. Mr. Peterson, you're telling this court that someone may have broken into your construction site, turned on an expensive piece of equipment, left it running until it broke, and you never reported this to the police? When you put it like that, it sounds bad. It sounds bad because it doesn't make sense, Mr. Peterson. The courtroom was quiet. Rick Peterson looked like he wanted to disappear. David found his courage growing. Mr. Peterson, when Carlos wrote to my daughter, he said the excavator had problems before I even started working there. He said you knew about it but kept using it anyway. Is that true? That's not... I mean, the machine was old, yeah. But it worked. Did you do regular maintenance on it? Rick's jaw tightened. We did what needed doing. Did you keep maintenance records? Look, I run a small operation. I don't have time for all that paperwork. Judge Henderson spoke up. Mr. Peterson, excavators are expensive pieces of equipment. You're telling this court you didn't maintain proper records for a machine that cost tens of thousands of dollars? I kept track in my head. That's not good enough, Mr. Peterson, especially when you're suing someone for damages. The judge turned to Mr. Richards. Counselor, do you have any other witnesses? Mr. Richards looked defeated. No, Your Honor. Do you have any maintenance records for the excavator in question? Any documentation about its condition before July 3rd? No, Your Honor. Judge Henderson removed her glasses and set them on her desk. She looked at Rick Peterson, then at Mr. Richards, then at David and Lily. Here's what I see, she said. I see a man who's been accused of damaging equipment when he wasn't even at work. I see clear evidence that he had the day off. I see testimony from a coworker that the equipment had pre-existing problems. I see a statement from a security guard that places the damage at a time when Mr. Morrison was provably elsewhere. She paused, letting that sink in. And I see a plaintiff who never checked security footage, never kept maintenance records, and never verified his accusations before filing suit. Rick Peterson looked at the floor. Mr. Richards, the judge continued, does your client wish to withdraw this lawsuit? Mr. Richards stood up slowly. He looked like a man who knew he'd lost. Your Honor, may I have a moment to consult with my client? Make it quick. The attorney walked over to where Rick Peterson sat in the gallery. They spoke in hushed tones, Rick's face getting redder by the second. Finally, Mr. Richards came back to his table. Your Honor, my client would like to withdraw the lawsuit against Mr. Morrison. David felt Lily grab his arm. He could barely breathe. Judge Henderson nodded. Very well. The case is dismissed. Mr. Morrison, you are free to go. But then she held up her hand. However, I'm not quite finished here. Everyone in the courtroom looked at her with surprise. Mr. Peterson, please remain in your seat. I have some questions for you. Rick Peterson looked nervous. Your Honor, the case is dismissed. Can I go? No, you may not. Sit down. The judge pulled out some papers from her folder. During the lunch break, while everyone else had been eating, she'd been doing some research of her own. Mr. Peterson, how long have you been running Peterson Construction? About 12 years, Your Honor. And in those 12 years, how many lawsuits have you filed against former employees for equipment damage? Rick shifted uncomfortably. I don't know exactly. A few? Judge Henderson looked at him over her glasses. I pulled your court records during lunch. You filed 7 lawsuits in the past 5 years, all against former employees, all claiming they damaged expensive equipment. That's quite a pattern. The courtroom was dead silent. Even Mr. Richards looked surprised. And do you know what else I found interesting? The judge continued. In 4 of those 7 cases, the employees never showed up to court. You won by default. They probably couldn't afford lawyers and didn't know how to defend themselves. Rick didn't say anything. The other 2 cases were settled for reduced amounts. Only Mr. Morrison actually came to court and defended himself. Makes me wonder about those other cases. Makes me wonder if those other workers actually damaged your equipment, or if this is something else entirely. David felt his head spinning. 7 lawsuits? He wasn't the only one. Judge Henderson wasn't done. Mr. Peterson, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I remind you that you're still under oath. Have you been filing false claims against workers to collect settlement money? No, Your Honor, I would never. Because it's looking very suspicious to me. You have a pattern of suing former employees for equipment damage. You never keep maintenance records. You never check security footage. And in Mr. Morrison's case, you didn't even verify that he was at work when the damage occurred. Rick's attorney stood up. Your Honor, my client is not on trial here. No, but perhaps he should be. This court doesn't take kindly to fraudulent lawsuits. They waste time, they waste resources, and they harm innocent people. She turned back to Rick. Let me tell you what I think happened. I think your excavator was old and poorly maintained. I think it broke down on July 3rd because it had pre-existing problems, just like Carlos Mendoza said. And instead of paying for the repairs yourself or filing an honest insurance claim, you decided to blame a worker. You picked Mr. Morrison because he'd recently worked on that machine, and you thought he'd be an easy target. Rick's face had gone from red to pale. You didn't count on him having a daughter who would fight for him. You didn't count on an 8-year-old child being smarter and more thorough than you were. Lily was gripping her father's hand so tight it almost hurt. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Judge Henderson pulled out another document. I'm also concerned about your other lawsuits. I'm ordering you to provide this court with maintenance records for all equipment involved in your previous claims. I want insurance records. I want proof that those damages actually occurred the way you claimed they did. Your Honor, those cases are closed, Mr. Richards protested. Those cases may need to be reopened if there's evidence of fraud. Mr. Peterson, if you cannot provide adequate documentation, I will be referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for investigation into insurance fraud and fraudulent lawsuit claims. Rick Peterson looked like he might be sick. Furthermore, the judge continued, I'm awarding court costs to Mr. Morrison. You will reimburse him for any expenses he incurred defending himself against your baseless lawsuit. David had only spent money on photocopies and stamps for Lily's letters. Maybe $30 total, but the principle of it felt huge. Judge Henderson looked at the whole courtroom now. Several other people had filtered in during the proceedings, and they were watching with wide eyes. Let me be very clear about something, she said. This court system is meant to provide justice. It's not meant to be a tool for people to exploit workers who can't afford to defend themselves. Mr. Peterson has apparently been doing exactly that. And I will not allow it to continue. She turned to David and Lily. Mr. Morrison, I apologize that you had to go through this ordeal. You are a hardworking man trying to support your family. You did nothing wrong. And your daughter? She paused, her stern expression softening. Your daughter is one of the most remarkable children I've ever encountered in my courtroom. She did the work of a trained paralegal. She never gave up on you. Lily was crying now, but they were happy tears. David pulled her close. This case has opened my eyes to a larger problem. Judge Henderson continued. There are people in this community who can't afford legal representation. People who struggle with reading and writing. People who get taken advantage of because they don't know how to navigate the legal system. That needs to change. She looked directly at David. Mr. Morrison, would you be willing to speak with some people about your experience? About the challenges you face trying to defend yourself? David nodded, not trusting his voice. Good. Because I'm going to make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else. I'm writing to the State Bar Association about this case. I'm contacting legal aid organizations. We need better systems in place to help people like you. Rick Peterson stood up suddenly. Your Honor, can I go now? No, Mr. Peterson. You're going to stay right there. I'm not done with you yet. She picked up her phone and made a call. Within minutes, 2 investigators from the district attorney's office arrived at the courthouse. Judge Henderson spoke with them privately for a few minutes. Then they approached Rick Peterson. Mr. Peterson, we'd like you to come with us to answer some questions about your business practices. Rick looked at his attorney in panic. Mr. Richards just shook his head, looking tired. As they led Rick out of the courtroom, Judge Henderson called David and Lily to approach the bench. Mr. Morrison, I want you to know something. What happened to you is not okay. You are not alone in facing these challenges. There are adult literacy programs available. Free classes. Would you be interested in something like that? David felt tears in his eyes. Yes, Your Honor. I've been thinking about it. I don't want to be helpless anymore. Good. My clerk will give you information before you leave. And Lily, she looked at the little girl, you have a gift. You're smart, you're determined, and you don't give up. Those qualities will take you far in life. Have you ever thought about being a lawyer when you grow up? Lily's eyes went wide. Really? You think I could? I think you could do anything you set your mind to. You proved that today. As they left the courtroom that afternoon, David felt lighter than he had in months. The lawsuit was gone. The truth had come out. And maybe, just maybe, something good would come from all of this. 6 months passed like chapters in a book that David never thought he'd be able to read. But now, standing in front of his bathroom mirror on a Tuesday morning in January, he was reading. Really reading. The newspaper article was about local adult education programs, and he was making it through without help. Slowly, carefully, but he was doing it. Some words still gave him trouble, but that was okay. He was learning. Lily knocked on the bathroom door. Dad, we're going to be late. Coming, kiddo. They had somewhere important to be today. Judge Henderson had invited them back to the courthouse, though she wouldn't say exactly why. Just told them to be there at 10 o'clock sharp. Tommy, now 5.5 and full of questions about everything, bounced in the back seat of their old car as they drove downtown. Are we going to see the judge again? Is Lily going to be a lawyer again? I was never really a lawyer, Tommy, Lily said, though she couldn't help smiling. I was just helping Dad. But everyone at school says you're famous. They say you saved Dad from the bad man. David caught Lily's eye in the rearview mirror. The story had made local news. Little girl exposes construction fraud, the headline had read. It turned out Rick Peterson had been running his scheme for years, collecting settlement money from workers who couldn't fight back. When investigators looked into his business, they found even more problems. Insurance fraud, safety violations. He was facing serious charges now. But more importantly, things had started to change in the community. When they arrived at the courthouse, there was a small crowd gathered in the lobby. David recognized some faces. Mrs. Chen, the retired attorney who'd helped them, the bailiff, Raymond, several other people he didn't know. Judge Henderson came down from her chambers, not in her robes, but in a regular suit. She smiled when she saw them, right on time. Come with me, all of you. She led them to a conference room that had been set up with chairs and a small podium. A banner hung on the wall. Justice Access Initiative launch. David looked confused. What's all this? Judge Henderson gestured for everyone to sit. Mr. Morrison, 6 months ago you and your daughter came into my courtroom facing an impossible situation. You couldn't afford a lawyer. You struggled with the legal paperwork. You were up against someone who was exploiting exactly those vulnerabilities. She looked around the room. Your case opened my eyes to how many people fall through the cracks of our legal system. So I did something about it. A woman David didn't recognize stood up. She was young, professional-looking, with kind eyes. Mr. Morrison, my name is Patricia Chen. I'm Mrs. Chen's granddaughter, and I'm a lawyer with the State Bar Association. Your case inspired me to propose a program we're calling the Justice Access Initiative. It's designed to help people who can't afford legal representation. She clicked a button, and a presentation appeared on a screen. We've partnered with legal aid organizations, local law firms, and the courthouse to create several new services. The slides showed different programs, free legal clinics held twice a week at the courthouse, a hotline people could call for basic legal advice, a simplified document service that helped people understand legal paperwork. But that's not all, Patricia continued. We also partnered with the community college to expand their adult literacy program. We're offering free classes specifically focused on legal literacy, understanding contracts, reading legal documents, knowing your rights. David felt his throat tighten. All of this because of what happened to him. Judge Henderson spoke again. Mr. Morrison, you're not the only person who struggled with these issues. After your case made the news, I received over 100 letters from people in similar situations. People who'd been taken advantage of because they couldn't afford lawyers or couldn't understand legal language. Your courage to fight back and Lily's determination to help you sparked something important. She paused. But I have to be honest. The adult literacy program needs help. They need volunteer tutors, people who understand what it's like to struggle with reading, and who can help others without judgment. David realized where this was going. You want me to help? Only if you want to. But I think you'd be perfect. You've been attending classes at the community college for the past 4 months. Your teacher tells me you're making excellent progress, and you understand firsthand what it feels like to hide this struggle, to be ashamed of it. You could help others feel less alone. David looked at Lily. She was smiling at him with so much pride it made his chest hurt. I'll do it, he said. I want to help, Judge Henderson smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. Now there's one more thing. She pulled out an envelope and handed it to David. This is from the district attorney's office. Rick Peterson pleaded guilty to multiple counts of fraud. Part of his restitution includes paying back everyone he wrongly sued. This check is for you. It includes the court costs you incurred, plus compensation for the stress and time you lost dealing with his false lawsuit. David opened the envelope. The check was for $5,000. He stared at it, unable to process what he was seeing. That's not all, Judge Henderson continued. The other workers Rick Peterson sued have been contacted. Their cases are being reviewed. If they were wrongly accused like you were, they'll receive compensation too. And it all started because you didn't give up. Lily squeezed her father's hand. See, Dad? I told you everything would be okay. Tommy tugged on David's sleeve. Does this mean we can get pizza tonight? Everyone laughed. The tension in the room broke and people started clapping. But Judge Henderson held up her hand.
Actually, we have one more surprise.
Lily, can you come here? Lily walked up to the podium, suddenly shy with all these adults watching her. Lily Morrison, Judge Henderson said formally, you displayed remarkable courage, intelligence, and determination in helping your father. You did research that some adults with law degrees couldn't do. You never gave up even when things seemed impossible. She pulled out a certificate in a nice frame. This is from the State Bar Association. It's a special recognition for community service and dedication to justice. You're the youngest person who's ever received this award. Lily took the certificate, her eyes wide. It had official seals and signatures, and her name written in fancy calligraphy. And this, Judge Henderson said, pulling out a small box, is from me personally. Inside the box was a pen. Not a fancy expensive one, but a good solid pen with Lily's name engraved on it. When you're old enough to go to law school, the judge said, I want you to use this pen to take notes, to write briefs, to fight for people who need help just like you fought for your father. Lily started crying, happy tears that she didn't even try to hide. That evening, David, Lily, and Tommy did get pizza. They sat at their small kitchen table in their small apartment, and Tommy told them everything about his day at school while getting sauce all over his face. After the kids went to bed, David sat at that same table with his reading workbook. The words came easier now. Not easy, but easier. He was on page 47 of a book about American history. Just 6 months ago, he couldn't have read a full sentence. Now he was reading paragraphs. Soon, maybe chapters. He thought about everything that had happened. The fear and shame of that lawsuit. The terror of going to court. Lily standing up in that oversized blazer, refusing to let her father face it alone. Sometimes bad things happened for a reason. Sometimes they pushed you to become stronger, better, braver than you knew you could be. David turned the page and kept reading. There was so much more he wanted to learn. So many stories he wanted to be able to read to his kids. So many documents he wanted to understand without help. But most of all, he wanted to help others the way his daughter had helped him, to show them that not being able to read well didn't make you stupid or worthless. It just meant you were still learning, and it was never too late to learn. In her room, Lily lay in bed looking at her certificate and her pen. She thought about maybe being a lawyer someday, about helping people like her dad who just needed someone to believe in them. She fell asleep smiling, dreaming of courtrooms and justice and all the people she might help one day. And in the courthouse across town, Judge Henderson filed away the last documents from the Morrison case. It would go down as one of the most important cases she'd ever presided over. Not because of complex legal issues or large sums of money, but because it reminded everyone in that courtroom what justice was really supposed to be about. Protecting the vulnerable, standing up for truth, and never underestimating the power of a child who loves her father enough to fight for him.